Yo! Greetings and welcome to the finale of the comprehensive Lightbringer comic retrospective. If you haven't seen parts 1 and 2 first, be sure to go check those out before watching this one. Otherwise, you well know what's going on. With all that being said, let's jump right into it. So, after some months of waiting for issue 12, The Darkness and Light sees on the front cover that the Darkbringer has seemingly killed the Lightbringer. Clearly, shit's about to go down. Leading into this speech by the Darkbringer, quote, "You know, Lightbringer, when you think about it, we're very much alike. Oh, here we go. We both believe strongly in our causes."
It's the same damn speech I keep hearing. You're just like me. We both want the same thing. Why are you fighting against me?
We both only want what's best for the world. We both have powers above most people. If you just accept the darkness, we could do so much to change the world.
The gentleman told me it. The smiling man said he used to be just like me. Wares told me we fought the same fight. And now Darkbringer's using the tired old bit. I've been up all night. I've used up most of my strength to stop some criminals, and then to help a woman experience some happiness again.
So please, know that I'm not doing this out of personal spite.
But none of that matters right now, because I'm sick of it. I am sick of evil people telling me I am like them,
unquote. And so without actually any kind of counter-argument to the Darkbringer, surprisingly, Lightbringer just barrels forward, ready to fight the Darkbringer, clearly sick and tired of all the speechifying. And so they fight, Darkbringer remarking how he's gotten more powerful since last they encountered, and how if it wasn't for the Linkara, he would have killed the Lightbringer last time. And the Lightbringer remarks how he's gotten stronger since then too, or rather, they both think this in their heads. They don't actually say this to each other. So they shoot beams of light and dark at each other. Hannah sees this on the TV and goes to help Lightbringer. Michelle being confused about how they could help, because they're just a couple of fucking normal people without powers. To which Hannah just comes right out with it and says that Carter is in fact the Lightbringer. However, the Darkbringer is handily toppling Lightbringer, and then he gives this grand speech to all of Pharaoh's City about their white and black clad savior. Quote, "Oh no, don't pass out on me yet. You haven't changed at all. You're still as pathetic as last time."
Actually, I got a lot smarter, dumbass.
No, you see, that was really stupid. Behold your savior, Pharaoh's City. Bear witness to his defeat. Witness the dying of the light and the triumph of the darkness. Surrender to the truth. Give on to the dark. Behold the truth. He is no hero, no angel of mercy. He's just a man. And this man fills your heads with lies and blasphemies. You can reject it now. This is a glorious age. This is the age of the darkness, where strength will be valued, and the blinding light will be snuffed out.
In the darkness's name, this place shall be its shadowed temple. This villain blinded you all to the truth of his nature. He made false promises about saving you, all and triumphing over evil. He blinded you, but fear not, for I have come to release you. What has he done to help you? Where has his heroism gotten you? Crime still exists. Corruption festers in every corner of this city. It will never be defeated with such $3 tactics. Abandon your faith in this deceiver, and embrace the darkness. We shall go forth unto this earth, people of Theros, to— what's going on?
Let him go! Stop the mugger! Lightbringer saved me once. Safe to walk the streets. Stopped the burglars. Helped to find my son. Rescued my sister. Saved me from the slavers.
It seems you're not very popular. Fine. You want him? Then take him!
Unquote. And as you can see, there's a bunch of other text boxes about people saying things that he did to save them and help them and what have you. So yeah, in the middle of the Darkbringer's grand speech, Pharaoh City doesn't buy into his bullshit, and they just start throwing random shit at him. And so the Darkbringer tosses down the Lightbringer, just like the first time they ever fought, waiting for him to plummet to his death. But of course, Hannah comes to save him before that happens. She then takes him back to base, and Michelle is pissed that they didn't tell her sooner about Carter being the Lightbringer, and how she was crushing on the Lightbringer for months now, and wondered how long they had been laughing behind her back and lying to her in general. Carter is apologetic for lying and what have you, and he doesn't know how to stop the Darkbringer, with his outlook for once being rather pessimistic. To which Michelle, while still very pissed about him lying, says that he is an inspiration and a brave shining knight, and that he needs to figure out a way to stop the Darkbringer, that he cannot give up. Darkbringer then hijacks the TV stations, I guess somehow, and says that he will be atop the Lodestar Tower tomorrow, and that if Lightbringer doesn't come there to meet his maker, then he's going to start killing people. We then get a page with a bunch of people remarking how they are rooting for Lightbringer, and how they know that he will defeat the Darkbringer. Except for the mayor, who refused to comment on the fight, which is rather mysterious. So Lightbringer goes to face Darkbringer alone, with some sort of idea as to how he might be able to defeat him. But in order for this plan to work, Hannah cannot come with him. He needs her to stay here, especially if he does die. He wants someone left alive to be a new Lightbringer, and there is no one he would trust more than Hannah. And so the Darkbringer monologues in his head about how he will be destroying the Lightbringer, and how the darkness will rule, blah blah blah, you fucking get it by this point. Though I will admit that he has some major fucking drip going on right now. Like, holy shit, that is a cool jacket, and way better than the stuff he was wearing before. Something Lewis even comments on down below, noting, quote, "Needless to say, the Darkbringer's original costume was really kind of lame. I mean, the black sleeveless jacket was a nice touch, and the skull gave him a 1990s dark vigilante feel, in my honest opinion, but the shoulder pads were lame, and it just seemed awfully bleh, especially considering that this guy is supposed to be Lightbringer's worst enemy. He just comes off kind of bland in appearance, especially when one considers that, for a guy who's called Darkbringer, he's got an awful lot of white going on for him." Enter Andy Warnes, a real-life friend of mine, responsible for a pretty awesome fan art. He took it upon himself to send me a revised Darkbringer costume, which I took one look at and realized, man, this thing looks a hell of a lot better than what I'm doing. And he was kind enough to let me adapt it to be the current model. The in-story explanation will come next week, but needless to say, we won't be seeing the business shirt and sleeveless jacket for a long time, unquote. So, you know, that's pretty cool. And so we do end up getting that explanation as to why he's wearing new clothes. Not that we really needed one, you know. Maybe he just wears more than one fucking outfit like a normal person. But yeah. Quote, "Well, how nice to see you again, Lightbringer. Like the new outfit? It's not exactly priestly robes, but according to the Black Oracle, it's as close as you can get to a dark sorcerer uniform. Admittingly, I'll miss my old clothes, but This is such a rare occasion. The people are watching us, hero. I admire their faith in your lad, but we both know it's hopeless. Because we both know the truth light blinds. It gives hope, but all it does is flicker and eventually burn out. Time and time again, I defeat you. Your light is worthless. Let them again see darkness triumph. Have you nothing to say? I challenge your every ethics, and not even a whimper? How pitiful! You don't even attempt to defend your beliefs. Even the sun itself retreats wait, why is it getting dark? It's noon. What are you doing? Heh, what's the matter? Afraid of the dark? I really have to thank you for monologuing so much. It gave me the time I needed. So please, go on with your little story about the darkness and moral compromise and blah blah blah. I'm just so interested. Michelle, you don't know what you're missing. Yeah, whatever. Do you think I'm frightened of you? You're just blinding them even more. Darkness still triumphs. Face the power of the darkness. Power? Tell me, Darkbringer, do you really know what the dark is? It's a place for cowards and criminals to run and hide in, because they know I'm coming for them. I am its constant star, and its brightest beacon. I am the keeper of Pharaoh City, the light of the sun. The stars in the city itself have spoken. You are not welcome here. Unquote. So, I'll admit it, that one line about what's the matter, you afraid of the dark, actually was kind of a nice little page end line. And I also kind of enjoyed the fact that the Lightbringer, instead of arguing with the villain and trying to figure out how to philosophically beat them, just fucking blasts the shit out of him with his light powers and tells him to basically shut the fuck up. Kind of a clever concept for the Lightbringer to use the power of the sun to fully envelop the Darkbringer in light. Even though this power was kind of not really established at any given point during, well, any part of this comic, so you could kind of call it like a Deus Ex Machina type thing, where he just like suddenly has this ability. So it would have been kind of cool to have it show up at least once or something before now. But all the same, still one of the better hero-villain fight/interactions in the series thus far. And so the Darkbringer collapses, and the Lightbringer says that he will not tolerate people like him anymore in this city that he protects. And Hannah here is then drawn with the most fucking goblin-ass face possible, teasing Michelle that she still wants to fuck the Lightbringer, and she says that she does not, her apparently having lost her vision of grandeur of him now that she knows that it's just her boss. Which, fair, I suppose. However, in the next page, we then see 7 businessmen alongside the mayor of the city that are extremely not happy with the Lightbringer's announcement of his protecting the city, and they are proposing some sort of plan to get rid of him once and for all, with this all possibly hinting at major corruption within the city from the very top, which, I mean, yeah, makes sense. Meanwhile, Darkbringer is being taken to a hospital and is suddenly healed of both his sanity and also his hair, and is given an opportunity by the Smiling Man, which is actually, interestingly enough, if you remember when I mentioned the Overlord comic, is where that canonically in this comic would take place, because the Darkbringer actually shows up in the Cross Overlord comic. I didn't mention that up until now just because it, well, wasn't necessary, and again, I was mostly focusing on the Smiling Man, but yeah, this is the only other time that the Smiling Man shows up, as well as the Darkbringer shows up in this comic, which I suppose makes sense. We are, like, in the last 3 issues after this one, so yeah, I figure that was worth noting all the same. The issue then finally ends with Carter having a schizo argument with his parents' picture again about pacifism and what have you, and how he felt good to hurt the Darkbringer, and how he can't seem to reason with his parents' picture. So yeah. Issue 13 of the Lightbringer's cover is whatever this is, opening on this art museum with a pretty interesting design of being robbed by this new villain, the Scarlet Baroness. Meanwhile, Michelle and Carter are suggesting different types of supersuits and alter egos for Hannah, but Michelle is still pretty mad at Carter for lying to her for so long about being the Lightbringer. Carter is getting pissed that no matter how many times he apologizes to Michelle, she won't forgive him, but Hannah defends her friend, saying that it's gonna take some time, and that he embarrassed her. Then we skip to a scene where the police chief is telling Lightbringer about this new Scarlet Baroness bitch, and that they don't know much about her, but she has stolen art and other such things from several places at this point. Oh, and also she's blonde, and she looks pretty much exactly like Carter's girlfriend Sandy, so, you know. Anyway, the chief also says that the mayor doesn't want him working with the Lightbringer anymore, to which Lightbringer seems pretty nonchalant about that. So he flies up to see the Baroness's hot air balloon, and it's then that Carter realizes that, yeah, this is Sandy. And so she kisses him, I guess not knowing he's Carter, but daring him to catch her if he can all the same. And then he goes to get her, but then she is suddenly gone as soon as he reaches the air balloon. There is a 5-month hiatus between this panel and the next, by the way. Yeah, we went from January to June 2009, and you'll notice that this panel is, well, not drawn by Lewis anymore. Instead, as the author's note says, quote, after a 5-month hiatus, Lightbringer resumes, with guest strips by Nick from Cooties for his week next week, and then regular artist Chad Rocco begins weekly pages, unquote. Meaning officially, from here on, the comic will no longer be drawn by Lewis at all, and will instead be done by, well, a couple different artists, as you'll come to see. Now, we'll talk about this choice a bit more later. I know it's obviously kind of a significant detail, but trust me, it'll make more sense when we get to the part where he's talking about the more main artist that's going to be working on the comic from now on. So until then, on with the story. So Carter takes Sandy on a date, and he debates if he should confront her or not, that he knows that she's the Baroness. And before he can say anything, she remarks, "We should have all our dates in the air, sweetie," and goes on to say in the next page, quote,
What?
What, did you think I hadn't figured it out, Lightbright?
Sandy, what are you doing out there?
I tried to tell you weeks ago, Carter. Humans aren't really one person. They're more like two. But us, we take it to a whole new level, hun. You and I, we're different from other people. Other people wake up every day, and they're the same person every minute. But us, there's more than one person in there. Another person who just wants to get out and live and breathe, and just shake off all that society tells us to do. I love to steal. I love to go to places where I'm not supposed to go, and just watch everyone try to catch me," unquote. And then on the very next page, the speech is then concluded with the artist Chad Rocco finally coming in, with the page saying, quote, "Life is defiance in the face of death, is leaping over rooftops or soaring through the air, is defying expectation. You said it yourself. Life is a miracle, but there's more to it than that, even. We want it both ways. Society's expectations, and then tossing them aside. As the Baroness, I can indulge my whims, and as Lightbringer, you can be the man you want to be. Chase me, Carter. Give in to the thrill."
I'm not like that, Sandy.
Oh yeah? You told me about your parents, Carter. You wear the masks just like I do. In your heart, you know I'm right. I'll see you in the skies, hun," unquote. And it's on the very next page that we can see a world of difference, backgrounds, interesting camera angles for the panels, and this very slick style with bright, bold colors, but deep, rich, intense blacks and shadows, which makes the page really pop. I like it. Of course, it's not really fair comparing the art style of someone who barely knew how to draw to begin with and was like pretty much learning as they go to someone with much more of a defined art style like this. But yeah, needless to say, this new art style is pretty interesting, and I think it was a good match for the comic stylistically speaking as well. But anyway, Hannah is almost done making her costume, but Carter is all kinds of fucked up after learning about Sandy being the Scarlet Baroness, and also his stress and anger over what his parents would think is all starting to get to him. But Hannah just smacks him across the face and basically tells him to stop being a pussy and act like an adult, and stop worrying about what mom and dad think, because at the end of the day, he's a man who makes his own choices and needs to stop worrying about what they would think of them. She tells him his parents were wrong, and that he needs to choose who he wants to be. And so he does just that, putting on his mask and going to go catch the Scarlet Baroness. To which he then asks Sandy to please do him a favor, because he loves her, to leave town and never return. Otherwise, he will have to take her in. But she says that she can never give up the fun, and then they kiss. To which Lightbringer apologizes to her and cuffs her. She says that she'll be leaving now then, and laughing as she then poofs through the use of a teleporter, which is how she was doing all these crimes to begin with. Then, with her from a safe distance, seeing the Lightbringer fly away, a tear runs down her cheek as she says that she's so very sorry too. Lightbringer then comes back to home and base, only to be greeted with Hannah in her new superhero outfit, with her new alter ego name, Osprey. Hannah is very excited about the new outfit and proud of her work, and Carter quietly smiling, a tear running down his eyes. Ending this chapter out, and wow, that got a lot better, honestly. And I don't just mean the art. Like I said, it's way better, and I actually like some of the new character designs and the overall use of dynamic shots. But somehow the writing also feels a little bit tighter as well. Less giant dialogue boxes, more panels left to simply let the pictures do the talking. But also the dialogue that is there feels more impactful. I know that there was a 5-month hiatus between when Lewis stopped drawing to when he found an artist to continue the comic. And it seems like within that time frame, Lewis either had a lot of time to really script things out for the rest of this issue, or, dare I say, he legitimately got a little bit better. Oh, and yes, in case you're wondering, Osprey is like a play on the Robin sidekick trope from the Batman series, since Robin is a bird and Osprey is also a bird. So, yeah, you get the point. So, things are starting to look up for this comic. So, let's see if this is continued on into issue 14. Before we go forward though, I did want to highlight the Angel Armor / Lightbringer blog, where Lewis gives some extra info about why he chose to get a new artist and stop drawing the stuff himself. Posted January 14th, 2009, Lewis says, quote, "Well, that Swish to Thursday plan went over like a lead balloon. Look, the problem is that with everything else in my life, I lack motivation to work on Lightbringer, when I really should. I was hoping to at least get through this storyline before I did this, but sadly, that's what it's come to. Well, either that, or doing black and white, and frankly, I don't like going down that route. I'm still interested in doing the writing portion, but the scenes I want to draw are always too far off, and they take far too much time. As such, hopefully I can either find an artist who wants to step forward, or at least get motivated again come February, when I'm taking a drawing class for college. So at the very least, I'll become a better artist, even if an unmotivated one," unquote. However, shortly after, he then made a call for artists to help him before, by February 26th, getting the new current artist, Chad Rocco, on the comic, which I think is fair enough. Writing may not have been Lewis's strong suit either, but he can occasionally cook with it. But the art was always the thing holding him back the most with these comics. So I think it was a respectable choice to try and do it this way instead. We'll be coming back to this Angel Armor / Lightbringer blog a little bit later, by the way. There's some particularly infamous posts and feelings Lewis had that I think are best highlighted later on. So anyway, on to issue 14, which starts off with this cover of Lightbringer seemingly being wanted among other criminals. We then move into this scene of a bunch of criminals trying to mug a couple, and so Lightbringer starts monologuing over them But then Hannah starts playing a loud song, and the two's different dramatic approaches sort of clash and just ultimately confuse the criminals. Then Hannah jumps down, loud and proud, singing the song, and beats up the criminals. Lightbringer also notes that her gloves allow her to levitate for a while off the ground as well, thus giving her limited flight ability. And while Lightbringer thinks what she did just now was cool, ultimately they need to be more cautious with time, take a less loud and crazy approach basically, especially with how they are now on the lookout for a serial rapist. Also, Michelle is now the operator on the telecom for them, so the Lightbringer team has gone from 2 to 3. Meanwhile, Chief Crane is having his ass chewed out by the mayor of the city, who wants Lightbringer gone, is now even more angry with this Osprey character who's joined alongside him, and the two have an argument over the matter. Quote, "This is an official decree. Tomorrow morning I'm holding a press conference concerning it. I'm officially outlawing his costume brand vigilantism in my city. Lightbringer has 24 hours starting from 11 a.m. tomorrow to hand himself over to the police. He helped us bring down the slavers. We would have brought them down with more time and help of the FBI anyway. He's stopped supervillains. The Smiling Man, Darkbringer, and the Scarlet Baroness are all at large. The Gentleman Killer is slated to be released in a few months. And let's face it, every one of those supervillains could have easily been stopped by the police with more time. Crime levels have dropped, the local economy is picking up. As a result of him taking the law into his own hands, the ends don't justify the means." Unquote. Bro, how the fuck is the Gentleman about to be released in a few months? Didn't that guy admit to being like a serial killer? He's behind the Black Dahlia? He's Jack the Ripper? He's killed multiple women? Even if he's lying about that, we know he's killed multiple hookers around the city? Okay. Well, anyway, and so the mayor has her conference, and Carter and Hannah are obviously not happy about it. So Lightbringer and the chief have a conversation about this, and he says that the co-poet has offered Lightbringer a place in the FBI to make this all official, so he can keep doing this. But Lightbringer says no to that offer, and that he needs to work outside the government, otherwise he would need to follow orders, and could be under the whims of someone corrupt. Lightbringer isn't sure what he's gonna do yet, but the chief respects him enough to say that if he does decide to hang the cape up, to please meet him up someday, without the mask, just to talk about the weather or something. Meanwhile, Hannah tries to figure out the legality of this whole thing from Lightbringer's lawyer, and she notes that the problem is that if it were just Lightbringer, she could easily have the charges dropped. But with Hannah on board, she's a liability, because it's not clear if she's over 18 or a minor, and there's no way to prove that she's over 18 without revealing her identity. Hannah thinks about the whole situation and realizes that maybe it's best that she stops then now, that if she's gonna be a liability for the Lightbringer, as fun as she's been having being the Osprey, as much help as she has been, maybe she needs to stop. However, Lightbringer will have none of this, and tells her to head back to base, while he deals with the serial rapist. And his lawyer advises that he turns himself in, that it may be the only way he gets out of this without being arrested. However, as Carter goes on to put on a fresh coat of fucking furniture paint to seep directly into his scalp, Michelle tells him that he shouldn't turn himself in, that he's been nothing but good, and despite her still being angry with him, he's an inspiration, and he chooses to use his power to save others, and he should keep fighting to be able to do that. She asks him if he really is gonna let someone tell him he's not allowed to help people. So in the next panel, on the last minute before Lightbringer would officially become an outlaw that needs to be arrested, he shows up at the office of the police chief, when I guess the mayor is also there, bearing the serial rapist right there to take in. His answer being no, that he will continue to fight crime regardless, and the mayor ends the comic ordering for them to take the Lightbringer down, meaning that he and Osprey are officially public enemies of the state. An interesting turn of events, all things considered. But now, we must move on to the 15th and final issue of this series, Death and Taxes. Finally, we are at the end of this comic. and we have this rather interesting cover teasing a new villain, White Death, which I didn't really bring up until now. But this character conceptually leads into one of the biggest controversies that Lewis had ever gotten himself into back in the day before Atop the Fourth Wall or any of that other stuff. Something which I could go on a little detour now to talk about, but I actually think it is best served talking about after we see this comic in full. But you might remember earlier that there was this whole thing where Lewis is like, I'm a feminist now, and I realized that the White Death character I had was wrong for me to be writing the way that I was writing, and so I changed things up, blah blah blah. Keep that in the back of your head as we go through this issue, and I will then finally reveal to you what this all is really about. Why Lewis turned into a feminist and got so scared about writing female characters to begin with. Why he felt it was appropriate to change this character, and why it's rather poetic that they serve as the final villain of this series. So with all that being said, let's get into it. So the issue starts with us seeing this character slicing tomatoes, and man, maybe it's the tomato in this scene and the way the hand is drawn, but this really is giving me Big O vibes. Anyone else know what I'm talking about? Well anyway, this redhead is hearing this speech play out on TV. Quote, been 2 weeks since the vigilante Lightbringer made his refusal to surrender to the police known. Police Chief Crane reports that the force is doing everything in its power to apprehend him. Mayor Hafferty's approval ratings dropped 5 points after her decision to call for his arrest. However, the mayor has said that she still believes that she's doing the right thing, calling Lightbringer's methods brutal and that they violate due process. In entertainment news, Star Boulevard, Faros City's premier theater block, is set to reopen within a month. The surprising announcement came last night from Samuel Gardner, CEO of Heavy Made, the construction company that helped build Faros City. We're pleased to announce that Star Boulevard's return will begin with Fade to White, the play that had originally closed the area back. What? Unquote. Then we cut to 3 weeks later at the scene of a crime, describing someone like a white-robed Grim Reaper swooping down and snatching someone off the street. The chief in secret talks to Lightbringer and brings up the fact that a stronger case is being made against him, like him dangling Serpent up in the air all the fucking way back in the day. And he notes that, truth be told, Lightbringer has done illegal things, continuing with, quote, don't I know it? I don't regret what I did. It helped stop the slavers. I know. And I'll stand beside you and say the same thing, but you can't keep this up. I have to. I will not allow that woman to dictate how and whether or not I can help people. So it's about pride then? You're really going to let that... Do you want me to help you or not? Stanley Urich, set to play the male lead, was walking out with some of the cast after the rehearsal for Fade to White. Someone dressed up like a white Grim Reaper swung down and picked him up off the streets. Any suspects? None yet, but if you come up with anything, I assume you'll tell me? Of course. Time for me to go. I'll stay in touch. Good. And get some rest, will you? There's no reason you need to work on this one. He's not holding up very well, unquote. Meanwhile, Hannah is frustrated because she's had to be benched so they can keep a lower profile. However, Lightbringer shows up shortly after and says that he will need her help tomorrow to see if the kidnapper returns to the scene. So Lightbringer and Osprey sit up and talk about this theater reopening and the Fade to White play that was apparently playing. Then Lightbringer sees movement from inside the building. He then sees that the man that was kidnapped is being held hostage here, and that the Grim Reaper character is in there as well. So he smashes in and shoots his light beams at White Death, but they are deflected by the Reaper's scythe. They then escape, and so Osprey goes after them to catch him, only for White Death to swing their scythe at her, nearly stabbing her and throwing her off balance, almost making her plummet to her death. the culprit ultimately getting away. Then, 2 days later, they are fixing Osprey's costume, as she complains and wishes that she wasn't bound to the dungeon of gravity. However, Carter is more concerned with the woman in the death costume, and he suspects, given her red hair, that she is Erin Kala, back for revenge, which confuses Hannah since she doesn't know who the hell that is. So Carter then explains the whole backstory behind Erin Kala and why this theater was destroyed before. Quote, about 10 years ago, Star Boulevard was the height of its popularity and profit. That theater we were at was the Broadway of the Midwest, where most critically acclaimed plays and musicals were being performed. Erin Kala was one of the most revered stage actresses back in those days. She started out as a brilliant prop and costume maker. Erin's best friend was a stage manager named Kelly Hoover. She was the one who originally introduced her to a director, launching her career. Fade to White was probably her most anticipated role. The play was one of those weird stories, heavy on art but low on plot, about a woman driven mad by suburban living. Back in those days, the slavers were powerful, but not at the level they were at when I took them down. However, one high-profile member of the gang was Player Big. Player Big was an idiot, but a rich and powerful idiot. He was a celebrity, someone that everyone knew was a slaver, what the law couldn't touch. Rumor has it that he was also a fan of Erin Kala and had attempted to court her without success. Big bribed the stagehand to obtain a copy of the script to Fade to White and decided that that was where he would make his move. There's a scene in the play where the Grim Reaper is supposed to physically and mentally assault the woman. Big wanted to make an example of her, show her there was no escape from his power, and that there was nothing he couldn't have. Erin knew something was wrong the instant she saw him. He was too tall, plus he had never worn a mask during rehearsals. Kelly Hoover realized it too, but she saw something that Erin didn't see. It was the first time the play had ever been performed. No one knew it wasn't supposed to go like this. At least not until the stage manager ran out. The confusion was cleared up pretty quickly, and Player Big was arrested. However, they weren't fast enough to save Kelly's life. Erin Kala was hounded by the press for a statement, but she started going into seclusion. If that had been the end of it, there would have been no problem, but it wasn't. Only a day after Kelly's funeral, Star Boulevard was already working on ways of cashing in on the tragedy, talking about movie deals, book deals, even another play about Kelly's murder. They made the mistake of trying to get Erin in on it. She joined a massive lawsuit with Kelly's other friends and family, and they just kept digging, never pulling out the stops until most of the major studios and theaters were bucking under the financial pressure. Combined with the economy starting to collapse, the rise of the slavers and other gangs, and both political and public support going away from the area, Star Boulevard collapsed. Unquote. And so now, obviously, Erin Kala would have some issues with this theater going back up and them redoing the Fade to White play and what have you. Overall, quite the interesting villain backstory. But I'm sure you all noticed halfway through telling that story that the art style had suddenly changed again. We now have yet another new artist, this time going by Sergio, who has a pretty nice art style, though I personally find that Chad's style fits the Lightbringer vibe a lot more. This one is also still kind of charming, just not quite as stylistically interesting as Chad Rocco's. Not that it would last for that long, of course, with this being the last comic in this series. What's more is that the story I just read out for you took over 2 years to come out. That's right, that entire backstory, all those panels I just read you, was released over the course of 2 years, with the first page of the backstory starting out on November 2010, and the last page ending on January of 2012. Clearly, the comic had become sort of, well, not Lewis's focus at this point in his life. And for good reason, as by this point, he had already become the famous Linkara, host of the Atop the Fourth Wall show, and was well more than established at this point, with many of his most iconic moments already having happened by now. And so it's clear why this webcomic was not something he was as passionate about or cared to finish. In fact, it's kind of a miracle that this issue even has an ending at all. Though what's more is there is an elephant in the room that needs addressing at this point that I will get to in a minute. But first, let's quickly finish what is left of this issue and this series in general. So, Lightbringer gets some tickets for the show from the chief so him and Hannah can go in undercover, and the chief notes that this is the last time he'll be able to help the Lightbringer for a while, that he's now being investigated regarding his relationship with the Lightbringer, and so Carter agrees to stay back for a while from him, not wanting him to lose his job. So Carter and Hannah go in undercover, well dressed and disguised, ready to see when the White Death will strike. White Death indeed starts making her way to have her plan play out, and Hannah just so happens to quickly catch her in the lobby and follows her. All as the show is about to begin, and then White Death makes her move, attacks the showman, and remarks that the show must go on. Then she has a grand speech, and I think I'll just read through these pages since this is the last dramatic speech of this whole series, so we might as well read the whole thing, right? Cheers to the last Lightbringer villain speech. Quote, "The show must go on. We just don't know that we're performing. There were plans. I know there were plans. This was supposed to happen later."
Damn it, she's too far away. I can't use my powers from this far.
It was supposed to be the same time Kelly died. It would have made more sense.
And if I don't get in close enough, people will see the glow from my hands.
It's what you want, isn't it? The drama, the story. It's sick. It's sick and cruel. But it has to be like that.
Shring!
Otherwise, there's no story. I didn't want to do this. But then I heard the radio, and I looked up and I saw them. And I understood everything. I don't have any choice at all. I have to murder this man. And for that, I'm so sorry.
Screw the secret identity. She's going to kill him if I don't.
Poof! Hold it! I have ugly shoes, and I'm not afraid to use them. You don't understand. Then explain it to me. Why does he have to die? Because I have no choice. Don't you see? Why can't you see them? They're sadistic. Our pain, our misery is their entertainment. I didn't want to do this. I wasn't given a choice. We don't have any choices. We're just on a stage. Kelly didn't even get any lines. But she's not important, is she? She didn't have any choice either. She didn't choose to die. They don't give us any choice. Look, I think I understand what you're saying, and it isn't fair. We should have a choice. So why don't you choose now? What? If what they want is for you to murder, then why don't you choose not to? They are the enemy, aren't they? They are the ones who won't let you have a choice. So the only way to defeat them is by making a choice. Choose not to do what they want. Don't give them the satisfaction, the cruelty they want. Don't let them direct the performance. It's yours.
What the hell are they talking about?
You can thwart them. Choose not to do this. I really hope I chose that, unquote. Which that whole speech and stuff was a little bit, well, I'll just read the last couple pages that sort of explain it. Quote, "And the vultures start circling. I wouldn't worry too much. When I pass them on my way out, well, let's just say they'll find out a lot those cameras are a bit overexposed right now. You just can't help but break the law, can you? I don't know. It just felt like the right thing to do. I admit I don't fully understand what was going on with her.
It seemed like you did.
I don't know for certain, but the way she was talking and looking at the audience, I just had a theory. Like, what if she stopped seeing the world like it is? She saw the world like one big play, but people were so into character that they didn't know that they were performing. And if you're in a play, you don't have any choices about the plot points or the lines you're saying. Sure, how you perform it makes a difference, but in the end, you don't have any choice.
Which means the people you love, the people you lose, you don't have any real power in people's lives because if they die, it was written that way.
Exactly. Don't know why she wanted to kill that guy though.
We may never know. And hell, maybe she's right, and we don't have any choices. They say in life, nothing is certain except for death and taxes.
Except if something dies, that means they had to be alive first, doesn't it?
I guess so.
Well, then we can add another certainty of life, that we'll have at least lived.
How very zen. Come on, let's get back to the store. We still have costumes to mend.
And the curtain falls, unquote. And so ends the story of the Lightbringer on that note, with the very last page coming out on September 19th, 2012. It's obviously not where the comic would have ended had, I guess, Lewis really wanted to keep going. Obviously, the whole plot about the mayor wanting to stop the Lightbringer, the 7 businessmen that seem to be controlling the city in the shadows, and so many other things were never resolved. Hell, even the whole White Death thing seems a little bit undercooked and seems like it was supposed to be elaborated upon more of the story, though technically we kind of already know the whole story behind White Death. It just never ended up making it into the series, which again we'll get to shortly. But overall, for its final issue, it was alright. The backstory was kind of interesting, but it's nothing to write home about at the end of the day. So that was the story of Lightbringer, and overall, what did I think of it? Well, I feel like I've made my thoughts pretty clear throughout this retrospective, that overall, surprise surprise, yeah, this comic, which is quite infamous, has a lot of issues. Issues that come from laziness, arrogance in some cases, but overall, mostly from inexperience. It's messy, clearly not planned out very well, or at all, most of the time, and is an even greater reflection of the mind of Lewis back then, more so than his books were. It's, simply put, a pretty bad webcomic, with the occasional moment that's alright, in a sea of boring sludge that even the most dedicated who want to read something cringy are sure to give up eventually after a while. I actually found it very interesting in covering the Lightbringer and looking up other people's videos regarding the series, that very few ever bothered actually talking about all the plots and characters and developments of the story. And most people were usually content with just reading the first few issues and leaving it at that, which I can't really blame them for. But truth be told, no one would ever even remember this comic. Hell, even know about it, period, if it were not for the elephant in the room as aforementioned. It being written and created by Louis Lovhaug, the host of Atop the Fourth Wall, the web series that reviews bad comic books and rips them to shreds with his commentary, criticisms, etc. With the theme song to this show literally talking about how certain artists are bad and certain writers are bad, and the whole crux of the show being to point out the flaws, be they big or small, in comic books. Maybe it's not fair, but when you criticize works, there is, truth be told, a higher expectation that then comes from your own work, should you happen to make any. It's a tale as old as time. The critic knows how to critique, but not how to create. And that is true in many cases. But I think it is always important to remember that the Angel Armor series and the Lightbringer, by and large, were creations made by Lewis when he was either a teen or very young. There is a pattern in both of his works of them starting out absolutely fucking awful, but by their end actually being kind of decent, with some pretty good parts even. Maybe nothing groundbreaking or all that amazing, but it's clear as day to see that the true story of Angel Armor and Lightbringer is the story of a young creative mind, with lots of feelings, ideas, and opinions that he really wanted to throw up all over the fucking place, and how he tried his best to mold his stories into receptacles for spitting out these opinions, before then finally deciding to then mold them yet again into something semi-decent, before ultimately abandoning them. As he grew older and he developed his skills, gained more experience, and took in people's criticisms more often. But at the end of the day, all of this nuance in when he wrote it and how it began and how it ended doesn't really matter, because Lewis is the host of the web series where he reviews bad comic books, and he just so happened to have made a really, really, really bad fucking comic book. But does him making a bad comic book make him a bad comic critic? Well, frankly speaking, I don't really give a shit about Western comic books, so I can't say for sure. But I would say, as a general rule, no, this is not the case. Who can't relate with wanting to create something? How many of you can relate with making something from a young age, and then looking back at it and wanting to crawl out of your fucking skin? I bet lots of you. Some of you might even feel that way about something you made mere days ago, minutes even after making it, let alone years, even a decade, decades even. This is very much the case with Lewis, as you will find that anytime someone tries to bring up the Lightbringer around him at this point, he pretty much ignores them, or gets very upset being reminded of it, and it's because he holds no illusions of grandeur about it. He knows it's a steaming pile of shit. And also, politically speaking, he's pretty much the opposite now as how he was back then, which makes the fact that the comic is specifically about his philosophy and politics at the time that he pretty much completely disagrees with now, probably all the more cringe-inducing for himself. This has led, however, to it being a pretty easy way to get a rise out of him, or to simply mock him in general by bringing up this comic, because of how clearly he hates it, which, actually, I personally find to be a bit of a shame. How many of you can relate to wanting to create something, but never doing it, or never sharing with others to see at the very least? Probably lots of you. Probably most of you, actually. And maybe seeing this story, hell, all of this angel armor and Lightbringer stuff, kind of makes you thankful that you didn't share your shit, which is more than fair enough. But I think there is something to be said about the courage it takes, especially Lewis knowing he was bad at drawing, to try and do this series anyway. And why? Because he was passionate, because he loved comic books, and because he had a story he wanted to tell. Maybe it turned out completely fucking cringe and terribly bad, but the actual pursuit of sharing stories out of pure passion is something that will never be cringe in my eyes personally. That being said, yes, it is more than fair to mock and critique Lewis's webcomic, when he has made an entire career of doing the same thing to others. It's the old live by the sword, die by the sword thing, you know? But is it fair to say that this comic is at all representative of the man he is now, and how he would go about writing or producing a comic if he were to do it now? Of course not. Well, I don't know about the writing, but at least not politically speaking anyway. But still, this comic all these years later still remains one of the biggest sources of mockery for the guy, and it's easy to see why. It's a really bad comic, made so much more easy to laugh at because he is the guy who reviews and mercilessly rips into comic books. But the thing is, even before Lewis ever became the guy who reviews comic books and stuff, this comic was still mercilessly torn apart before anyone had any idea who the fuck Lewis was. See, the thing is, something I haven't shared up until this point, is that it wasn't only the Comic Genesis forums where people were criticizing this comic. Before any of the Atop the Fourth Wall or anything like that, this comic had actually gotten a fair bit of infamy back in the day from the Something Awful forums, where they, as you can imagine, mocked it endlessly, something which had apparently become known to Lewis at some point, which prompted him to respond on September 29th of 2007, which illuminates some light, you could say, on some of that backstory of the White Death character, as well as what Lewis's original plans for her were. Now that you've seen what her story ended up being in the final issue of the comic, this should make a lot more sense, especially as to why something sort of felt like it was missing context-wise to that whole story. Quote, "Well, I figured I might as well get this over with, since I got yet another surge of visitors yesterday from somethingawful.com, and the fact that they link my comic with being one of the worst out there, and that pretty soon it's going to be reviewed on Your Webcomic is Bad and You Should Feel Bad About It. I've been wondering whether or not I should do this for a while, mostly because the people who are dead set in their opinions aren't going to be swayed by anything I have to say on the matter, but I figured I might as well try anyway. For those unfamiliar with this, Lightbringer has been posted on Something somethingawful.com's forums before as an example of one of the worst webcomics out there, and people frequently post about how detestable I am for it. Well, I'm doing a preemptive strike and responding right here to it, since I really don't want to shill out $10 to join the forum just to respond to criticism. I'd really wanted to avoid this, since frankly I feel that if someone has a problem with someone else's work, they should just confront them about it and tell them how they feel. Sure, most of the time they won't listen, but other times they will, like I have when people have criticized me on various things about Lightbringer. First, yeah, my art sucks. I've made no secret of this. While throughout various times in the comic I've talked about how I liked how a panel came out or thought something looked awesome, well, of course I would. I'm still new to comicking, even after a year, and I'm always trying to find ways to improve. So when I think something turned out pretty well, I'm going to be proud of it. That doesn't mean it truly is anything to be proud of, but there you go. Secondly, me calling myself a published author when I did it through self-publishing. Yeah, it's not really the same thing, but honestly, I didn't truly understand the difference until recently, and only now am I starting to realize all the flaws my books contained. I'm trying to improve upon that in my future writings. Next, the trade paperback thing. Yeah, that was really stupid of me. I actually thought I could go back, revise the comic pages with a little better artwork and rewrites, and sell the thing. But honestly, my artwork sucks too much for that to work out, and I sincerely doubt any such option would work in the conceivable future. This one's a doozy. For the regular readers, remember how I had originally planned for issue 8 to be about White Death, and then suddenly it changed to focus about Hannah? Well, half of that was to try to respond to criticism I had been given about how the characters in Lightbringer didn't seem to have any real personality. The other half was because of White Death's backstory. When I first came up with her, the idea was, in a nutshell, that she was an actress who was raped on stage in front of thousands of people who didn't realize she was being raped. I patted myself on the back for the ingenuity of having such a traumatic backstory for a character. But then I found out about girlwonder.org, and I became a feminist, realizing the plight of female characters in comics. And I posted my idea about White Death, and they told me it was a bad idea. And the more people I told about it, the more people told me it was a bad idea. So I realized they were right, and I pulled the story. But then, those on somethingawful.com found that post and decided to link it, using it as an example of what a terrible person I was, even drawing the scorn of one person in particular who shall remain nameless, even though I have made every attempt to earn their respect. What they failed to do was to point out that in the very same thread they posted to on girlwonder.org's forums, I had posted how bad of an idea I realized it was, and asked for advice on how to change it, which the fine people there did, and thus I shall be doing the revised story later down the line. I recognize I'm still not perfect in all the details when it comes to treating female characters with respect, something that I'll be pointing out when we get to issue 10, but I am conscious of it and I am trying to change. Something more recent that was posted critiquing me was how I referred to the art I purchased at FallCon was fan art. That was most definitely an error on my part, something that someone pointed out to me and I subsequently changed, upon which they suggested I call it gift art or guest art. I know that those who I had gotten the artwork from weren't fans. I just honestly thought that most of those terms were interchangeable. At the moment, that's all I can think of. I know I really shouldn't care about what other people think of me, but it's important to me that people don't think I'm an awful person, even if they don't think my comic's any good. Thanks for your time. Unquote. Yeah, as you can imagine, this post only managed to get more attention and scrutiny, something which I think you could really feel in the issues later, as Lewis seemed to try to justify or fix things that made him look bad and shit, or preemptively go on about how this character that's female has been treated badly and don't worry, I'm going to fix it, blah blah blah. I should note on a personal basis that when it comes to writing characters and stuff, I don't really fucking care about what their backstory and stuff is. I don't think writing a character that's female that has a really fucked up backstory suddenly makes you a misogynist or a woman hater or something like that. I think if you do it badly, it could just mean that you're not a very good writer, or you didn't think it through very well. But to me, this logic comes very dangerously close to those sorts when they see a villain in a story who does really fucked up evil things, and they start thinking that maybe the creator of said character is also fucked up and stuff. Otherwise, how could they have possibly come up with such a fucked up character? There is a bit of a thin line to be said, since there is also many times where someone's thinly veiled fetish is just showing up in the story. And yes, that fetish could just be abusing women, rape, or various other much more fucked up things. But I think it is in those cases a very case-by-case basis. And in Lewis's case, there definitely was some fetish stuff in there, based on some stuff we're going to get to momentarily. Which is why I think he pushed so hard into this whole feminist angle. Him having done so, it's seemingly out of shame, which is admittingly very funny to me, but yeah, all the same, I figure I should at least note all of that. This post actually had quite a few comments underneath it as well, in response to this news about White Death and his comic having been shared on the Something Awful forums. Unlike most of his other blog posts, which tend to have pretty much no one commenting underneath them. So I'll go ahead and read a few. User Luxshine says, quote, "Well, Lewis, first of all, congratulations on changing your mind about White Death. It takes a lot of guts to change the backstory of a character when you realize you were wrong. Second, to be honest, I'm a constant reader of YWIB. I have never commented, as I feel most of the comments are unnecessarily mean. But I feel that Solomon and his team, while they are very mean on their way of writing, have some good points from time to time. I'm surprised that in Say You'll Be Reviewed, as I thought that Solomon and team focused on those artists who simply won't try and get better. You definitely don't fall into that category. So if you end up reviewed, my heartfelt advice to you is this: listen to whatever you feel can help you, as you did with White Death, and ignore the rest. They'll be mean. There will be some who say, you're a terrible human being. Yes, but you know you aren't. So why listen to them?" Unquote. On the other hand, Rational Madman said, quote, "So you gave up a chance to explore the relationship between fiction and real life, the way fiction can desensitize us to the horrors of real life, and the fact that by masquerading as fiction, real atrocities can be perpetrated, not to mention making a profound symbolic statement about both the crassness of modern American entertainment and the instinct of most people to ignore the evidence of evil right in front of them, if given even half a chance, because a bunch of ideology said it was bad. Without the courage to tell the stories you want to tell and explore and examine the themes you want to, your writings will never be more than mediocre pap fit only for third-rate sitcoms. Next time, grow a pair and write the story you want to write, regardless of how many angry feminazis protest. You want to be a better writer? Then don't let morons dictate what you write in order to further their political agenda." Unquote. But then, we have a rather interesting exchange, one that went into a full-sail meltdown of sorts, when Anonymous asked, when quoting Lewis about the supposed person who he was attempting to earn the respect of, quote, "I'm really curious, what exactly did you do in an effort to earn the respect of Abby/Ryuko?" Which Lewis responded with, quote, "So much for remaining nameless. Essentially, I just tried to be friendly. Upon reflection, it probably was irritating how I'd always try to engage in pleasant conversation. However, when they first started insulting Lightbringer on Something Awful, she stated, paraphrasing from memory, 'You think that's bad? I have to go to class with this guy.' At the time, she and I were in a class together, and I had maintained my attempts at being friendly, though I had pretty much gotten the picture that I wasn't really considered a friend. But on the same token, I hadn't thought of myself as an adversary to her, or someone who she disliked. More like a fifth wheel, is all. After that, I finally outright asked her, "Why do you seem to dislike me?" She listed off a few reasons, mostly relating to the fact that I was, and still kind of am, rather egotistical, especially when it comes to minor achievements. As such, I asked for the chance to improve my image, and she agreed. A few days later, when I saw the post on gw.org, again paraphrasing, I recall she said she was disgusted by this, and that, how dare I call myself a feminist. After that, I stopped trying to earn her respect. Maybe respect is too strong a word for what I expected, but I don't think I deserved full-on scorn or surprisement, unquote. But then, this Abby, his classmate who thought he was egotistical and posted about him online, enters the chat and had something to say in response to what Lewis just said, saying, quote, "Truthfully, part of the reason I don't like you is because I saw you as someone who could not take criticism or ignored it. Changing your storyline is definitely a good indicator that you can take some criticism, though I'm still not sure why you'd have thought it was a good idea in the first place. The other reason I don't like you is because I see the parts of myself that I don't like in you. The person who, despite being unable to reach professional quality, thinks they're hot shit. It's really more my problem than yours. I guess part of the problem is that I spend a lot of time bitching about you behind your back, but never to your face. I don't like being that person, so I'm going to try and stop. I doubt we'll ever be friends, but I really don't like hating people, so I'll try and stop. Also, in the interest of truthfulness, I was kind of weirded out about how you talked to all my friends about me, but how I don't like you, even the ones you'd never met before," unquote. To which Lewis responded, quote, "At the time of originally coming up with the storyline, it was before I'd ever realized what a gendered trope rape was, and I wanted something that would be what I thought was both dramatic and traumatic for a backstory. It's that very immature mindset that assumes horrible trauma, blood, death, destruction, etc. equals maturity and high art. I suppose male privilege probably played a part in me thinking it was a good idea originally, as well. Perhaps you're right here, Abby, but it's still a problem I have to face with myself. When I first met you and the others in Hack Writers, I really did think I was grand for self-publishing a few books that could certainly stand to use some revisions. I've never gotten the impression of you that you had my kind of egoism going on, but thank you for those words. Never saying anything to my face was definitely what I was bitter about, which is why I really appreciate you posting that. Sometimes I get the impression you were uncomfortable around me, but I didn't know when to stop myself, and for that I apologize. I certainly don't want to hate anyone else either. While we may not be able to be friends, I'd like to think that, at the very least, we're not enemies. Some of those occasions, like last year, I was attempting to make inquiries to find out if there was something I had done to offend you, before I first made that confrontation in class. As for stuff like yesterday at Falcon, well, you've seen how my mouth starts to flap, but I've always wanted to stay on the high ground, so I don't think I ever said anything negative about you when I had said conversations. Only that there was a misunderstanding on the storyline, and that I have egoism problems. In the case of me conversing with Spike, the artist/writer of Templar, Arizona, which reminds me I have to go read that, it came up when she mentioned she was a frequenter of the Something Awful forums, although she said she never really checked out the webcomics thread. In any case, for any and all wrongdoings on my part of the whole thing, Abby, I apologize, and would like to thank you for speaking your side of things here. Unquote. Now, the reason I highlighted this, firstly, is to showcase the mindset of Lewis at this point in time, having just had his webcomic thoroughly thrashed online and mocked no less by his peers, classmates, and even a woman who he was attempting to befriend, or was perhaps slightly interested in romantically, possibly. I don't actually know if that's the case, I'm just kind of reading between the lines with their conversation. Mind you, this was all again before Atop the Fourth Wall, and just about as much attention as Lewis had ever gotten, and it was pretty much all disappointment from the few fans he did have, have mockery from all the new people, or dirty laundry being aired out by people who maybe weren't his friends, but he didn't know seemed to hate him to that degree. In all things considered, I feel like Lewis handled himself pretty maturely, especially because he very much could have gone into full-on, well, fuck you all territory, and I kind of wouldn't have even blamed them, to be honest. It's interesting seeing how he responded to these things at the time, as opposed to today, where Lewis finds himself in a very much similar situation, where many people online basically see him as a big joke, a living meme of sorts, that has every single embarrassing part of his dirty laundry and drama revealed for all the world to see, something which we will be getting to at a later point. Talk about them now, but I really do feel as though they are best showcased when we finally get to the change the channel drama, which if you're not aware of what that is, don't worry about it, we'll get to it eventually. But needless to say, many memes around Lewis, like the green M&M, Mama's cock, I'm a nasty cock slut, did you learn your lesson, and gay dead Muppet gangbang, and so many more that have been spread around, well, there's a reason they've been spread around, and we will talk about that more later on. But for the most basic of context, Lewis was into some pretty, fetishy shit. Something which would be revealed at a far later point in time, and needless to say, many found to be quite funny. Then there's the oneyplays memes, which have been animated and quoted pretty much anytime Lewis is brought up literally anywhere.
I have to say I loved Linkara, right? I was watching various places and I saw Linkara, the great Linkara. He did Atop the Fourth Wall, and he talked about the famous Power Rangers rant, right? He said it'll be out when it's out, and we like that. It'll be out when it's out. But great work ethic. It was so good when Iron Liz was there, the great Iron Liz, right? It's okay.
Don't you talk about me, you son of a bitch.
Who said that? What is that?
It's
What
me,
is that?
the Lightbringer.
Look, there he is. There he is. Get him out of here. Get him the hell out of here. Then cuts to the audience beating the shit out of him. Fucking ripping his jacket up. Throw him out in the cold. Don't give him his jacket. Don't give him.
Meanwhile, Doug Walker's just looking on going,
He's going, build that wall!
And while back in the day, Lewis kind of just responded to all this by simply saying, yeah, my shit's kinda bad and sorry about it, how does he handle it all now? Well, in regards to the oneyplay meme, there is this kind of famous or infamous clip of someone bringing it up on stream. And, well...
Obviously. Chocolate Gamer, my question was, have you sent the oneyplay or oneyplay fan-made game? Yeah,
no, because I have zero desire to ever think about or talk about oneyplays.
I don't even know what that is.
They are a YouTuber who is the one who constantly mocks me, makes fun of me, and apparently they do an impression of me that is that everyone loves. Everyone has to point out, wow, his impression of you is so accurate. And he's the one who popularized people calling me the Lightbringer, based off of my crappy old webcomic. So,
wow.
Screw him.
Yeah, no. Not cool.
Yo, microfusion cells!
Yeah, needless to say, he didn't find the comedy in it. And how about the Lightbringer? Well, there is a somewhat recent clip of him discussing this comic, which you can see here.
Thing about webcomics. Speaking as someone who made a terrible webcomic back in the day, hi Lightbringer, people still bring you up to me to try to insult, demean, and embarrass me as if you weren't first made like 15 years ago when I was 17 or 18, and when I was a very different, much stupider person. It's also done as some form of gotcha to me to indicate that I shouldn't be allowed to review things, because talented people have never made bad things ever, as this very show has demonstrated. I understand firsthand that webcomics 9 times out of 10 are a labor of love. In my case, I made Lightbringer back when I had a deep desire to write superhero comics. Hell, in the earliest days of this show, I tried to promote another indie comic I was writing, and never finished, nor will it likely ever be finished, because I still had that drive to write superhero stories back then. Hell, I even tried to keep Lightbringer going during those early days of the show and had other better artists work on it while I tried to keep writing. It didn't work out, and even at that point I recognized, wow, my earlier stuff sucks. This stuff sucks less because someone who knows what they're doing is drawing it. The point is, working in a creative medium like that without the expectation of being paid is done simply for its own sake. I eventually sated my creative desires with this show, from the critiquing side to doing my own ego-stroking storyline where I play all the characters and know how to build robots and use magic, when in reality...
So, needless to say, Lewis has gone on the defense big time for this comic at this point. Mostly because many, as he noted, use it as a sort of gotcha card, that because he made such a bad comic, it makes him an illegitimate comic reviewer because he made a bad webcomic. Which I don't personally agree with. Circling back to the point I was making earlier, it is far easier to criticize and critique something than it is to create something. And while those skills do overlap, anyone who thinks every good critic is a good creative, or that every good creative is a good critic, probably have never done one or the other themselves. And in some cases, having made something truly bad, I think can give someone a perspective when they can see that their old stuff is bad, and the pitfalls that they fell into. Sometimes it makes it even a little bit easier, I would imagine, to see the pitfalls others fall into as well. That being said, Lewis is also well known for being rather hostile these days online in regards to anyone criticizing him about anything, and those moments of humility found in those old posts are replaced often by self-importance and a real lack of a sense of humor in regard to himself, as well as just a general anger towards what should just amount to random-ass mean comments. Like this post he recently made over on Twitter, in response to someone saying, "It's been 15 years. Format and jokes are the same. A real darkness that one ought to bring some light to. Also, your fantasy novels suck." To which Lewis responds, "Yeah? Oh my god, you guys, the shitty fantasy novels that I said are bad that I wrote when I was 14 are bad. News at 11. And yes, it's been 15 years, and the format is indeed the same, because there's nothing wrong with the format. If you just want to be shitty and call me the fucking bullying nickname based on another shitty thing I did when I was younger, just do it so I can block you faster. Don't try and be like, oh my god, the formula that has been successful for 15 years is bad, and I will cleverly hide my true intentions," unquote. Which, I don't really understand why Lewis felt the need to highlight this comment to begin with, other than the fact that he wrote these novels and made this webcomic are so purely irritating to him that even some random comment bringing it up, some comment clearly made to just specifically insult him, was enough for him to not only respond to, but respond to fully on Twitter for all his followers to see. It's such an over-the-top reaction, which many have contrasted with the likes of Doug Walker, who also has been the subject of much ridicule, mockery, and many memes, including from oneyplays as well, and has been shown to be much more willing to laugh at himself than Linkara ever has, which is something I want to explore in more depth as we finally get into talking about the Atop the Fourth Wall show. But I want you to remember this part about someone who Lewis knew personally, airing out his dirty laundry in a public and embarrassing fashion, not just for him, but for all of Channel Awesome. Let's just say that the longer you remember this exact moment that happened over on the Lightbringer blog, the more things start to poetically line up later, shall we say, and I think it is key to the drama that is to come. I imagine Lightbringer will always be part of Lewis's legacy, whether he likes it or not, no matter how hard he tries to move on or past it. It's just so easy to bring it up all over again. Hell, I clearly just did that myself, in a perhaps much more thorough fashion than anyone else on YouTube ever has. And not only that, but me making that video about all of his books, which no one else has ever covered in full. I can't imagine I'm on Lewis's nice list, despite me actually having zero ill will towards him at all, and me personally not advocating going and fucking with him. He made some cringy books and cringy webcomics. It's not that fucking serious. It's not some terrible sin that he made a bad webcomic. And being perfectly frank, a good majority of webcomics are really fucking bad, but most of them get to be forgotten, lost to the sands of time of pure obscurity. But not Lewis. He gets to live in a perpetual hell where his angsty, pretentious, badly written drivel of a comic is forever brought up for everyone to see. Hell, there are even people who have rebooted or tried to continue the Lightbringer comic to make a better version than the one done by a teenager to young adult, I guess. But I won't be covering any of that here because, I mean, we all know the only reason anyone remembers this fucking comic is because Lewis Lovhaug made it. The Linkara. You think I actually would be interested in this premise if it wasn't made by him? Fuck no. I don't give a shit about fucking comic book superheroes. And besides, without Lewis's cringy writing and constantly going on about philosophy and politics, this comic has literally nothing going for it premise-wise. So nah, any continuation will forever be living in the Lightbringer's perpetual shadow, much like Lewis himself, I suppose. Except at least he made it, and no one can take that away from him. Though, I guess he did technically make it public domain, so, you know, go for it if you want. Though, on a more, actual, advice given thing, right? If I were to say one thing to Lewis, if he ever happened to watch this video, which I'm pretty sure he will not be doing, but if somehow he did end up seeing this, I personally think Lewis, instead of trying to distance himself and get upset, should instead embrace it and laugh at himself. Not allow mean comments or people mocking him to get under his skin to such a degree. Allow himself to not take himself so fucking seriously. Maybe then he would finally see the light. Bringer. Okay, but seriously, he should take a chill pill and just stop taking himself so fucking seriously. Recently, Lewis got a makeshift plush campaign funded for a little plushie of himself. And you know, that's pretty cool. Although I personally think he had better drip when he had the whole trench coat and vest thing going on and not this blue shirt jacket or whatever. But regardless, now that he has proven that his fan base is willing to buy a normal plushie of himself, I think Lewis should fucking totally own everybody right now and make his next campaign to have the same thing done, but for a Lightbringer plush. It would be epic. It would be popular. People would love that thing. Both his fans and his haters could all come together to enjoy this one thing. And it would also be a showcase of his character growth, and that he himself is willing to not take this so seriously, and thus takes away the power anyone seemingly has over him by reminding him of these things. Also, there would just be a Lightbringer plush. It's a win-win for everyone involved. And if this were to ever happen, I would happily own one. Consider it my personal promise, should this day ever come. Even though I'm pretty sure this will never happen, think it would be fucking sick. In the end, I wanted to showcase this series as, yes, a look at a funny cringe comic Lewis Lovhaug made, before I get into talking about his actual videos and more recent projects, but also because I think it's a very good story all its own, of a young creator throwing his ideas out there, and then trying his best to mold it into something better as he realizes it's kind of all garbage, but ultimately leaving it behind to rot in favor of a new path. Because sometimes it's okay. It's okay to create things and then kind of find them complete ass later on. It's part of growing up and experimenting as a creative. And truly, one never gets better without constant failure. And sometimes it's okay to let them go, to then perish a quiet death on some little website no one really goes to or knows about anymore, and travel down a new path, one that goes atop the fourth wall. And that is it, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you so very much for watching this whole retrospective. It's been a lot of fun covering all of these Lightbringer comics, and by extension, the Angel Armor book series as well. And I'm glad to finally have it all under my belt. It's something I've been wanting to do for a while, and was one of the main goals I had to get done by the end of this year, and I, well, clearly got it done by the middle of the year. So, very nice. Of course, now I'm sure you're all expecting the Atop the Fourth Wall retrospective, where I finally start talking about his actual videos and all the other stuff. And that is definitely coming up. But I want to make sure I give it the due time it deserves, since there is a lot to cover, and I need to be kind of picky and choosy over what parts I choose to cover, since I, well, can't be as comprehensive as I was with these two things. But it still will be the longest video on Lewis or Linkara that's ever been made, I still assure you that. But there will probably be some shorter videos in the meantime while I work on that. So don't expect it anytime within the next couple months, more than likely. And as a matter of fact, I have another Internet Fables that I think I've mentioned a few times by now coming up, as well as an experimental video of sorts I don't want to spoil anything about, that I want to come out with as well. A sort of small series of video essays that I have been meaning to get to all year, that I feel like now is the perfect time to do. You'll know more information about it here shortly, especially if you happen to be a patron or channel member, where I of course will give updates and behind the scenes look at all the stuff that I got cooking up. And trust me, the Internet Fables and the little video essay miniseries I got cooking up is something that I'm very proud to be making, and I am super excited to showcase you guys everything as it comes out. Which, speaking of as well, I want to make sure I give a super big shout out to all of my loyal patrons and channel members. If you also want to donate to the channel and see behind the scenes stuff, videos early, and just generally support the channel and what I do, then please be sure to go support me on Patreon or via channel membership. But with all that being said, I do want to thank all of my night eggs and my night owlets, as well as a very special thank you to all of my great night owls, including Sombra Devante 06, Hexmaniac Hannah, and Ho Hot, as well as a super duper special thank you to all of my arch owls, including the wise Nicodemus, the talented Cherry and GT, the always chi vibes Zen Garden Party, the daring Daniel Petrie, the Super Saiyan Star Punch Gaming, the mysterious Mr. Gaming Sheep, the fearless Forgotten Ace, and the Supersonic Sword. Thank you all so much for supporting the channel and for continuing to make these long and crazy projects all very much worthwhile. But with all that being said, until next time, this has been Dylan the Night Owl, flying off.